So making oil. Okay. When looking at the processes, excuse me, in the earth, the processes in the earth. Well, I was just doing a little bit of something earlier, which is following up on a Facebook post that I made quite a while back. Inside different layers, the earth acts like a medium, and there are different chemical reactions that are happening inside the earth. Death pits, different stuff like that. So I was often wondering about all of the gases that come off of different things, and I'm not saying mixing it all at the same time, but you have a level of starting gases, which is oxygen, hydrogen. You have salt versus fresh water in different areas. Much like when we was walking across Robert Kett Park over here. And when I was walking over the Kett Park, you'll notice these circles in the grass, where the grass is slightly thicker. But if you pay more attention to that, there are also fractures in these areas, and they look like circles. To anything, it looked like a load of UFOs came down, and they look like, what do people call them now? The things in the cornfield. I'm not saying that these are crop circles due to a UFO landing or anything. No. It's water. It's the water pools in these areas, and therefore the plants that are in this area seem to respond to it. And if it's too much water, it will die. And if there's too little water, it will also die. So I noticed in these areas, these little cracks, that there could be, perhaps, some sort of process coming up through there, a gas. Or most people don't want to understand this process called rising damp. They deny it. Well, when water evaporates, of course, it lets out vapor. So if the ground is getting hot and there are cracks in the ground and underneath it there is a pit of water, or water has ran into these areas, and this is where that steam is escaping. Once again, in these cracks, you're going to feed the grass, which happens to be grass in this one, is going to grow and respond to that because it's getting nutrients as it's steaming. What has that water been mixed with? What nutrients has collected? Because that water has probably come in from all different areas and brought with it nutrients. And as the ground layers start to get hot and it gets hotter, this steam that travels through these cracks happens to be circular because around the perimeter of this area where the water is more shallow, and therefore would respond to this steaming process and make a sort of oval or circular shape pattern. And it's not uncommon for the cracks in the ground to have multiple of these cracks, and therefore make a pattern that appears visually as a crop circle or different things like that. But I don't think it is. Due to something coming down and landing. I'm not sure about the ones in the crops, but these particular ones that look like little circles, I think it comes from a process of this, and where the edges are, and this is going to move in and in and in and in, the more it evaporates due to the temperatures outside getting hotter, and the ground is warming up, and therefore there's moisture inside there, and oh, my way out is here, and then there it goes. And then once it does, anything that grows in that area is getting a supply of nutrients, and it's getting water when the rest of it is parched because there's just not enough to evaporate around, or it's too thick in places. That's what I think is doing that. Well, anyway, I was looking at some of this, I was looking at the top of a cemetery, and there was a lot of juices into the ground beside it. Okay, on Google Earth, I can't remember where it was now, I was just looking around randomly on Google Earth, and then when I zoomed in, I noticed that where this cemetery was, in the layers, there was this staining in the soil. And that what got me thinking a little bit more on, it's a bit of a morbid subject, but someone's got to do it, that when we cook food in a saucepan, it leaks oil. We didn't use oil to cook certain meats, and I know that they could be possibly put oil, but I'm talking about like when you have a barbecue or different stuff like that. Sounds really bad, I understand that. But the meat is sort of leaking out this oil. And this is not much to look at, sort of crude oil and different stuff like that, that when it collects and goes through different mediums, and you've got lots of it, and then you've got some tree juices running into there as well. If you take down a tree, put it in a bag, seal the bag, you'll notice how much of this juices start to leak out of it and are collected inside the bag, therefore condense. And you get this juice. It's like it with anything. Again, I was looking at possibilities of space, and when we travel in space, that if somebody dies, we can't just throw them out the ship, because your nutrients, your water levels, there would have to be some level of dehumidifying or dehydrating in order to remove that lost moisture and collect it, and then it recirculate back into the ship. If not, we'd deplete all of our water supply in just chucking out. And to look at this is pretty brutal, and it's a bit morbid, but if you don't do it, and you don't do it here on Earth, if you were to ever make a ship that was then leaving the solar system, you would find that you'd run into your very own man-made extinction, humankind extinction, based on not knowing this little bit of information. Then it got me thinking onto fuel, and can we take different types of decay in different areas that when they then start to come together and meet, they then have this thing called a chemical reaction. Some vegetation gets very hot, really, really hot, and these juices become very hot. And then it seems to sort of cool down a little bit. And then when this type of juice now that's gone through the filters, which is the layers of rock, and it's if it's turned acidic, it's going to melt down some of these layers of rock, and then that is going to enter into this soup, and then that's going to run on, and then it might meet on with some forest decay, and then that's going to chemically react once again and get hot again. And therefore, when you've got heat, you've got cooking, and then you've got this sort of making of this, let's say, crude oil, and backwardly piecing these different things, like when you put crude oil in, it heats up, and then you can collect it in a chamber, and different levels of condensing give you different chemicals. It's basically like saying that if I did that in reverse, I would create crude oil. So taking crude oil and you burn it, and then you get your different levels of separation due to the collecting, and it condenses in a diagram. I think we all understand this one. In your chamber, heat it at the bottom, different things come apart, it separates, blah, blah, blah. And if you were to do that in reverse, would you then make a crude oil? Which I think it is. But how do you then make those types of ingredients from the vegetation, animals? It's all sorts of different weird and wonderful decay, because that's what life is, isn't it? At the end of the day, that once life is finished, there's a decay process. Decay and chemical reaction that versus another reaction over here. Something's dying over here and its juices are leaching out, and then these ones are something died over here and is rotting away and its juices are leaking, and then they meet somewhere here, and then this combines, and then you've got let's say different pressures as well. If it is trapped underneath layers and layers upon rock, and it can't leach out, and it can't expand through the rock layers, it's going to build in pressure. This different pressure is now leading on to more cooking. While the substance itself is chemically reaction, it's therefore getting hot. While it's making its heat, it's expanding this pressure. Pressure is then building back into the soup. It's then dissolving mineral contents that is around it, such as whatever it's in. Let's say if it was acid and it was now meeting into a salt solution crystal, it's then going to dissolve these crystals, and then that's going to become a part of the soup. And then this soup that you are left with at the end of it, and then we have the ocean where it might not be here 1 minute and then it is the next. Well, there would have been animals living and different forests living at the time, and its juices would have then come down, and then the ocean comes on top of it and adds this extra pressure on this already pressurized. It's really mixing things up. And Earth is the best cooking pot at cooking up not only life, but also cooking up crude oils. It's also good at cooking up then gas, because once it's finished reacting here and it might start to then travel on down further, it will then leave a gas pocket. Gas pocket. Humans come about a few thousand years, billion years later, and are like, oh my god, it's gas here, but we have no idea why it's here. It's probably because of this. And it might not be. It might be that that was an ancient, let's say, decay chamber. A decay chamber, and as that's a decay chamber, the stuff that was decaying in there has probably trickled out and gone elsewhere, moved on, let's say, and it's left this ancient gas from that decay process, which was the chemical reactions and different stuff like that. So you know, when we look at the oils, I don't know, let's have a look into the pan with the same as each. Yeah, so we're looking at different pans here. I did different levels of different pots. And then if we were to make these all join together, they leave behind gas pockets and different types of gas pockets that are left behind. There are a lot of chemical reactions. There's also heating and cooling. There is different amounts of pressure. We also have rock filters. So different mineral contents is then mixed into this if it's going acidic-y, and then it turns into an acid, and then it dissolves a few things. This energy is then spent at reacting in with this and corroding this material. Now it can no longer corrode this material. Now it's got this gas in there that's pressurized, different stuff like that. So I think the starting gases are oxygen and hydrogen that it might be trapped in with. And then when it starts to get hot, different things like this, then there's that runaway process. So can we actually make crude oil? Well, maybe yes is the answer, but you're going to need some life forms that are decaying in that. And it sounds really brutal, doesn't it? It's a lot to get your head around. It's a lot to get your head around. So if we took a load of orange peel and threw it over there, a load of forest and put it over there, a load of cut grass and put it over there, and then we took a load of, let's say, cemeteries over there, and then some animals over there, somewhere along the line, this stuff's all going to come together, and it might just make methane. Somewhere along the lines, these gases are going to react and cause different gases, which then cause different chemical reactions, which then get caught up in this stuff. And then we're going to see a different, and then the minerals that it travels through and dissolves is going to create something even different and even more so weird and wonderful, and then it could cause it to become explosive or flammable and more flammable based on the pressure, and then it's cooked this in, and now carbon, and the oxygen's now converted into carbon in this process and that process. And then what you've got is the earth cooking its own recipes. Some recipes are bad, let's say methane, and some are good, crude oil, and then some are even better, gas, natural gas pockets, that's why fracking is so popular. These are ancient